Hey everyone, welcome to the Higher Alignment Podcast. I'm your host, Minh-Thu, and I'm an executive coach focused on helping people heal their burnout and reconnect to their purpose through self-mastery. I show executives and high performers how to identify their blind spots and use this to propel them on their journey to finding more fulfillment and freedom without burning out. If you've been feeling lost and disconnected in life, book a complimentary connection call to discuss how we can get you back on the path of self-mastery and living a life that feels successful on your terms. Go to higheralignmentconsulting.com/program to book your call, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, everybody, I am so excited for you guys to listen to today's episode because we're diving into imposter syndrome, and I am chopping it up with the one and only Jonathan Z. Cohen. And I got connected with Jonathan on LinkedIn, and immediately when I found his content, I gravitated towards it right away. He's got a really unique background. He's an attorney, he's an endurance athlete, he's a husband and a father. He's also worked as an infantry combat soldier. And so he's accomplished some really incredible things in his life, but he is so vulnerable and open about his journey in getting there and just how, he's gone through these spells of feeling like an imposter, not feeling like enough. And so he's also the host of the Inside the Inspired podcast, and his take on achieving greatness and working through a lot of these things that we feel as humans that are overachievers is really refreshing and honest and vulnerable. And at the end of the episode, he gives a really practical exercise to use to kind of help integrate all these things. So sit back, relax, enjoy the episode. And here we go. This is Imposter Syndrome with Jonathan Z. Cohen. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to another episode of the Higher Alignment Podcast. And I am really excited because today I have Jonathan Cohen with us here today. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm
My
well,
daughter says
thank
hi
you.
too.
Okay. Tell her we all say hi.
Everyone says hi, baby.
Oh, thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us, especially obviously you have a family who I'm sure always wants your attention. So just thank you really for being here.
My pleasure, truly. It's awesome to be here. Love the content, love the mission. Proud of what you're doing, and I know you're putting out a positive message, so it's awesome to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm excited about today's conversation because I don't think I've actually ever talked about this topic in any of my content. And mainly because I think I have a weird relationship with it myself. So I haven't felt like the voice to speak about it with. But I wanted to talk to you today about imposter syndrome, which is obviously kind of become a buzzword, I think a little bit in the growth and development, world. But it is something I often hear from a lot of my clients. And so, from consuming your content and the little conversation we've had, I can tell you're a person who strives for greatness. And I think greatness, means different things to different people, and it should be in alignment with each individual person. But, I see obviously you're a family man, you're married, you're a lawyer, you've done a lot in the physical space. So my first question is, for someone who has established themselves to that level, and feel free to maybe dive into what that is for you or even your definition of success in that term, what has been your experience with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, it's funny because you never know when you arrive unless you decide. But you have to have this insane level of self-awareness and humility that you're willing to accept the fact you're proficient in your skill, but you're also a willing student that has to have a skill set and curiosity that allows you to further explore how to refine that particular skill and expertise. So Alex Hormozy talks about this concept of stacking proof. For me, that resonates as an attorney. And the switch kind of flipped when I largely experienced imposter syndrome with my work as an attorney, with my fitness as an endurance athlete, with my love of personal and professional development. And I didn't really ever get that feeling of I've arrived, no matter how many books I'd read, no matter how many reps I'd done, no matter how fast I ran, no matter what I accomplished financially. There was this tug and this unwillingness to let myself qualify myself as an expert, particularly when I looked at other experts. And so my background is 5 years of public service in 2 different countries as a criminal prosecutor in Bronx County Special Victims, as an IDF soldier in the Israel Defense Force infantry combat for 2 years. And collectively, I didn't feel qualified enough to be able to offer advice or insight, but I always had a passion for wanting to be better. And I feel like because of all of these stigmas that I had imbued upon me and I fell for as a kid growing up, labels and names and issues, that really played a big role in, well, you better not qualify yourself as an expert because, we want to keep people safe and away from you because the experts are over here. And so that kind of led me down this path of wanting to become an academic and overachieving and not really ever considering it an overachievement. And so I would do a lot of self-degradation. I would avoid compliments. I didn't know how to take a compliment. I didn't know how to look at myself in the mirror and truly be proud of myself, even if I had achieved an objective measure. It's like, oh, you got a law degree, but where do you go to law school? Oh, you're a prosecutor, but like, what kind of cases do you handle? Or you ran a marathon. How fast did you run? You did 1,000 pull-ups. Did you ching it over the bar every time? Like, all of these different things where I tried to create as much objective evidence for myself that I was who I know myself to be, but externally, the world didn't perceive me in that way. At least that's what my own self-talk was about. And so my experience with imposter syndrome just one day changed when I heard that sentiment, and I decided to start making a list of all the things that I had done that established my expertise and my proficiency in the areas of personal and professional development. And fitness is the easiest way for me to articulate that because I've done objectively hard things. I've done 1,018 pull-ups in 4 hours, raising tens of thousands of dollars for charity. I did 1,018 push-ups in an hour, which raised another few $1,000s to feed over 20,000 people through Feeding America. I ran a 58-mile ultra marathon. I've run over, I think I've done like 8 marathons and ultra marathons at this point, and some pretty good times in there too. And I could lift a certain amount of weight. So I dealt with this internal dialogue of not really knowing how to talk to myself, how to appreciate myself. And so that led me to strive to do these things, that if I could do a triple clap push-up, well, maybe someone will appreciate that. If I could do a backflip, someone will appreciate that. And so it kind of led me down this path of striving for so much that, I couldn't even appreciate the gravity of the things that I was doing. And so once I outlined all of the evidence, and at that point in my life where I was still a criminal prosecutor, I had realized I am who I say I am, and I am capable of all of these things that I thought I was incapable. But it came down to taking an objective lens and looking at my life in a way that helped me weigh facts and circumstances as they were present, and not telling myself a story that I hoped was true, but really looking at what was on paper and what I believed internally that not even I could question. And so once I took that perspective of not even I can question this, it helped me start to make massive strides. And well, now I can add value because even I can't question the fact that I've done A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z, and then an alphabet in another language, which to some may sound arrogant, but I needed that. I needed to be able to show myself objectively and unequivocally that regardless of if someone's going to put down a 58-mile ultra marathon or my experience as a prosecutor, whatever the thing is, I knew within me, my internal world, that I was who I say I am.
Yeah. That is, what's so fascinating about that is that pretty much every high performer, overachieving person I talk to has that same sentiment. You know what I mean? As far as like you have a goal in mind where you think like once I get there, I'm gonna feel this way. Right. And then we get there, and then it's like, okay, maybe you get like 30 minutes or an hour. It's probably proportionate to whatever the size of the goal is. You know what I mean? But eventually, then it just kind of becomes, like what's next, and the bar continuously moves and moves, and then but like you said, there's something in our brain that doesn't register that as like a check mark per se. It's like, let's just keep moving the target further and further away. And when I start working with my clients and we're setting quote unquote goals for the journey, I will get them to start listing, okay, so what are the external goals that we're going for during our time together? And they
Mhm.
list them out. And then I get them to say, okay, so from everything you just told me, like what's the feeling associated with if we hit each of these goals? So I
Mhm.
get them to do physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all these things. If we attain all these goals, how is that going to make you feel? And, it's a pretty small group of words that typically come up, but it usually gets narrowed down to more confident, more self assured, more internal freedom, feeling more seen. And to me, it's like with what you're explaining, we're always looking for the external to bring that feeling to us. But what we really need to be going after is that feeling itself in the first place. And it's like if we go after those feelings, the quote unquote imposter syndrome kind of naturally like dissipates on its own.
100%. I think, I've interviewed over 100 high performers on my podcast, and I have posed this question about imposter syndrome, the experience that goes along with it, the feelings that go along with it. Matt Higgins gave a great answer about it. He talked about Matt Higgins is the author of a book called Burn the Boats. He was a guest shark on Shark Tank, 9-figure entrepreneur. And he talked about how there's no final arbiter on belonging, meaning like no one gets to decide if you belong. Ultimately, it's an internal decision. And so when you make that internal decision that you belong, again, with that objective lens, with that weighted believability, with that long list of things that established you're an expert, that not even you could question what you have to say, that is when that inner world starts to shift, where it becomes more about how can I serve the people because I actually have value to bring, not, oh, I know what's best for you. Like, you have to have that perspective. Like, intention and ambition alone are not enough. You have to have you have to have the skills, you have to have the habits, the routines, you have to be a resource, not just a willing resource, right? Because you may have all the positive intention in the world, but ultimately, like, you're not that talented yet. You're not that skillful yet. So we can't lie to ourselves. So imposter syndrome is a sign that most people are actually growing. They're right outside their particular skill set. I interviewed F-16 fighter pilot Michelle Curran, and we talked about her experience in the Air Force, learning how to navigate those inner world feelings of imposter syndrome. And it largely comes down to, how do you see yourself outside yourself, right? You got to have that inner conversation and truly be honest with yourself. But am I being too hard, or am I not being hard enough? Is there room for me to get better? There's always room for me to get better. But right now, like, how am I actively trying to get better? And if you don't have that curiosity or willingness to learn or refine or improve your skill set, or you think that you've quote unquote arrived, ultimately, the best never stop learning. So as long as someone has that perspective, I think, of how can I continually add value? How can I learn? How can I create? How can I be of service? That perspective I think cures imposter syndrome at its core, because it's no longer about the feeling that you experience in your heart and more about the value and service that you can create in the world.
Yeah, I really love what you just said there because it seems like it's kind of like it's this fine line between like I love how you said if you're feeling a bit of imposter syndrome, like that's a sign that you're actually growing because it's kind of creating that awareness of, well, am I doing enough? Right? Like there's more room to grow, as you say. But then it's also this fine line of like not self-deprecating yourself in the process, right? Like not beating yourself up to the point where you feel a fraud, but having enough curiosity, as you alluded to before, to be like, okay, I'm maybe I know there's always more to do and more to expand and evolve into, and I can provide more value. Um, but again, it's just such a subtle line between the two of making sure you're not falling over one way too much
Mm.
of the other, right? I would say for like in your experience from talking to the people that you interview or yourself, like how does someone, in your opinion, navigate that fine line of making sure that they're not kind of ending over in the bucket of like where it's hindering their growth, like to the point where now the noise is so loud in their head that it's scaring them or holding them back from actually taking a step forward or taking that next client or putting out that piece of content, something as, even though we're inundated with content all day, I know I have a client right now I'm dealing with who's incredible at what he does. And the thought of creating content scares the shit out of him. I'm like, but you're so good at what you do. But it's, so from your perspective, how does someone navigate that?
The intention it's a great question. And I think that the intention at its core, as long as it's pure, should be the North Star. Ultimately, let's take your friend as an example. He's depriving people of his message if he's as good as you say he is, right? He's depriving people of his message that he could potentially be helping if he doesn't share it. And so navigating the line, in my experience and in my opinion, comes down to, again, we're going beyond the intention here. When I look at my particular skill set or my particular accomplishments in this particular problem, can I help somebody process and solve this particular issue? And how would I help them do that? What's the unique mechanism that I offer that helps me solve that particular problem? And so walking the line largely becomes about when you take an objective lens and you remove your feelings from it, you remove your ego from it, and you assess yourself as a professional and ask, would I hire me? And I think that if the answer to that question is yes, find out why. And if the answer to that question is no, find out why. Because if you can reflect candidly with yourself, you already know internally the truth to that answer. I remember the other day, I've been through a lot, I've seen a lot, I've done a lot across multiple disciplines, humbly. And someone the other day, that one of the first lessons you learn on cross examination is not to ask a question you don't know the answer to, and to make sure it's binary. But I was practicing a new seminar that I'm delivering on resilience, and I asked an open ended question that I didn't know the answer to. And candidly, I wasn't prepared for what the person responded. And so I'm quick on my feet, and I was able to talk around it and give a meaningful response once I processed what the person said. But in that moment, as proficient as I am in the things that I do, I felt the sense of imposter syndrome, like, oh God, what did I just like? I wanted to go publicly speak, offer seminars, and deliver. And like, I've spent the hours, I've done the work, I know the evidence is there, but why can I answer this question? And that's just the demons doing their thing. Because the more time you spend in rumination and less time synthesizing and processing, that's where we let the feelings take over and the doubt take over instead of focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. It's one thing to gather information, it's another thing to analyze information, but it's a whole other world to develop an opinion on the information. So if you truly have read not just 1/600, like for example, I just finished the Walter Isaacson biopic of Elon Musk, and I've watched a couple podcasts and I've consumed a bunch of his content on Twitter. Am I an expert on Elon Musk because I spent like 10 hours? No. Like it doesn't, it did probably more, but like it doesn't make me an expert on Elon Musk or his career or anything like that. It makes me an amateur or like just interested in that particular topic. So I can't go out holding myself as an expert as someone who authors books or can solve $1 trillion problems just because I spent some time studying someone who did. So I think that if someone really takes the time to assess if imposter syndrome is definitely something and sincerely something that someone's suffering from, then it's worth it to have that candid conversation with yourself, reflecting on that framework of would you hire you? If yes, why? If not, why? And when you reflect on those answers, those are problems or positives one way or the other. That either becomes your marketing material or it becomes areas for growth. So either way, you're getting assets out of it. You're getting experiences out of it. It's just a matter of how you choose to reframe, assess, process, synthesize, develop an opinion on it, and deliver ultimately to solve the problems that you want to solve.
It's a great way to be curious about the question, but also have, like, you laid out a really logical framework to break it down, right? Like just asking very matter of fact questions, but in a way that it can lay out the evidence for yourself, right? And you can make the decision from like almost being outside of you. Like now you get to observe it. And I think there's so much power in being able to step outside of your current situation and observe it from a different lens. My girlfriend always says like it's hard to see the picture when you're in the frame. So the way you've laid out the questions, it's like, okay, it's offering you that opportunity to just kind of step out of being that person and feeling, the somatic experience of, feeling anxiety or overwhelm or fear, and then just kind of look at it objectively, like you said. I have two questions in response to what you said. The first one being, do you think that people sometimes latch on to imposter syndrome? Like I have found, and maybe this is the reason this is the first time I'm talking about this with someone, is like, I'll be honest, whether people resonate with this or not, I do find some of these words sometimes become a little like buzzworthy. Like when narcissist was the big thing, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? And
Yeah, 100%.
like narcissism is a scale.
I
All of us
remember
have
that.
narcissistic degrees to,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
then everyone's like, he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist. Like, you get one, you get one, you get one. Like, it was being thrown out so much that I was like, I don't even want to address this because it's just, it feels like people are attaching to it. And sometimes I feel a little bit the same with imposter syndrome, not downplaying anyone's experience with that. I think we all have moments of feeling unworthy and wondering if we're good enough. That's just the human experience.
Yeah.
But sometimes I wonder, and even just like the syndrome part sounds so like you kind of said earlier, it's like almost like another label that we can kind of throw on ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm dealing with imposter syndrome. Like you're dealing with the flu, or does it make sense what
100%.
I'm
Yeah,
asking?
yeah, it definitely. So I just want to make sure I understand the question correctly. So when you asked latch, is it latch as in it's a buzzword worthy of creating content, or it's an identity crisis that someone's uh
I mean, I mean
preventing
more
them from
from
like doing more?
the latter, more
Okay.
of like you're attaching to it as a reason why you can't do
Mm,
it, like
yeah,
further than the experience of the moment. Like you almost believe like literally you have a
yeah,
syndrome.
yeah, yeah. Great question. So I'll just talk about the narcissism portion as an example, right? Like people always assume narcissism is a bad thing, and that's because they can't wrap their heads around the concept of arguing for and against something. And narcissism in a vacuum is a bad thing, right? Self-obsession, etc. But there's also Machiavellianism and psychopathy that go along with it, where it's about manipulation and like malicious intent and like thinking of yourself first. I think of myself first when I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go train so I can be calm to take care of my family and business the rest of the day. Like, that's a narcissistic attitude. But at the same time, like, if I don't serve myself, I'll just be short and I'll be, short fused or irritable or unproductive or self destructive in some weird way. And that doesn't help me be of service to other people. So I have to put myself first, if you will, and wake up earlier and get things done. So I don't think that in a vacuum any of these concepts are as bad as people on the internet make them out to be. And that's what I mean about developing an opinion on it, like we were talking about in the previous question. And so when it comes to imposter syndrome, people definitely lean into the victim mentality of, oh, like, I'm not good enough. But it's more like, what are you doing to get better? Like, if it really matters that much to you and you really want to improve and you do want to add value, then either your intention isn't as pure as you think it is, or you don't care enough. And I think that if people can, again, have that reflective, honest, genuine conversation, whether it's to a video camera, to a journal, to themselves, to a partner, you gotta really start to know yourself and the things that are true about yourself and what lights you up and what drains you. And if the thing that you care about, like, I love speaking on stages and inspiring people. That doesn't mean that just because I love to do those things doesn't mean I need to work at them. Like, I need to refine my seminar on resilience. And even though I'm a resilient dude and I'm proven in certain areas and I have prosecuted hundreds of cases and I've stood on stages in front of hundreds of people and delivered talks on things that I know either free flow or prepared, doesn't mean I don't have to prepare for this next thing. And it means I still have to put in the work. It doesn't mean that I am gonna let myself tell myself a story of, oh, you don't deserve this, like, you should crawl back up, just focus on your job, it'll be easier. And those thoughts still come in. It's just the demons, it's just the self-doubt and the negative self-talk and the limiting beliefs that want to in my brain trying to keep me safe, but you don't grow where you're safe. So I think people don't deliberately try to keep themselves in their place. I think either they don't know any better or they have been in environments where no one's really challenged their growth. And so the idea of being questioned or the idea of being challenged is frightening or uncomfortable. So it's not worth doing what you and I would probably call the deep work on. And if someone is limiting themselves by attaching themselves to this, I mean, look, it's still possible to have a growth mindset, a fixed mindset in some areas of your life, even if you identify as someone who has a growth mindset. I could never do that, right? You'll hear basketball play, I could never do that, like professional athletes, if you will, or professional, like for me, I could never jump out of a plane. That's just a limiting belief. You don't even realize it when you say it. So I think a lot of it comes down to lack of awareness and lack of self-awareness, where even the things that someone wants to do, they don't realize that their language and their mindset is holding them back so subconsciously, right? You have problem aware, problem unaware. I think a lot of people are problem unaware when it comes to it, and that tends to hold them back. So you probably have two different sets of people where problem unaware, problem aware, and don't want to change. So some people don't know any better, and some people know better and prefer to latch on. But the more you latch on, that comes down to the real intention, where it's just easier to look at your phone and scroll first thing in the morning. It's easier to it's easier to leave the office at 5 p.m. because you want to beat traffic or just go back to your TV and watch Netflix all night. And, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it definitely doesn't align with the words that you may or may not be telling yourself of, hey, I wish I should be living this life, or I could be living that life. And so I think it largely comes down to the self-assessment that someone's willing to make for and about themselves when it comes to, do I really feel this way about my life, or am I just comfortable with where I'm at? Do I care to get better? And if the answer to those questions are a resounding I'm good where I'm at, and stay there, you'll get exactly what you expect. Or raise the risk tolerance, be a little fearful, fail, iterate, improve, and get better for the next one.
Okay, if you've been feeling exhausted and overwhelmed with your day-to-day life and you're not sure whether you're actually burnt out or not, go take my free quiz called Is My Burnout Fixable? It only takes 1 to 2 minutes, but it will give you an assessment on what level of burnout you're currently experiencing and also provide some tips you can start to implement right away to help improve your current state. So go to higheralignmentconsulting.scoreapp.com to take the quiz and then DM me or tag me with your results. All right, back to the episode. You know what I
rambled there, sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. What really sticks out to me right now from everything that you said was you had mentioned victim mentality. And I would say that if I was to poll my audience and probably yours, everyone would be like, well, no, I don't have victim mentality. Like, that's probably why you're here listening to this in the first place, is this message aligns with you. But what I have found through my own experience is that victim mentality can be programmed so deep into the subconscious that you don't even realize that it's playing out in your life, and like,
Yeah.
if I reflect on my own journey, in my previous career, I worked for, a top luxury dealer and auto dealer in the world for 9 years at a really, successful career with them. But I was overachieving, completely in my masculine energy, like doing all these things to keep up. And if you would even ask me at that time, like, if I was playing the victim card or anything, I'd be like, no way. Like, look how I stepped to the plate. I sacrificed myself. I helped take this management team to another level, yada, 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 all these things. But if I really look underneath the surface and now where I'm at now, I see that the victim mentality was playing out in the sense that I had to come across as perfect, as this overachiever, in order to avoid any potential rejection, vulnerability, just feeling any type of lack. But that really is a defense mechanism for victim mentality. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it was just weaved so underneath the surface. I was just trying to mask the fact that I even felt that inside.
And that's exactly why people go and overachieve, right? To your point. I think that when people are faced with that inflection point of, well, look at everything that I've done, and like, I'm like, all of these outcomes that I've achieved, ultimately there's something deeper going on, whether it's compensation for something else, or some type of lack that, again, it's possible to be someone with a growth oriented mindset who wants to be better, who achieves disproportionate outcomes, and at the same time, like, won't leave the country or won't try a new food and still be a growth oriented person, right? So having that awareness that conceptually you can still maintain a fixed mindset in certain areas despite the fact that you are quote unquote growth oriented, in my view, is extremely key to honing and cultivating self-awareness around these particular issues, because then you subconsciously put a frame over, well, okay, I accept that premise. What areas of my life do I maintain a fixed mindset then? Where am I subconsciously using limiting beliefs to cop out of doing things that make me uncomfortable. And, is it that my venture won't work? Is it that my partner will leave me? Is it that I'm not good enough? These are the hard conversations that we have to have with ourselves. But as you know, and we've gone back and forth about this, hard conversations, internally or externally, ultimately become growth conversations. And if you can embrace that mindset, then hard conversations don't have to be so hard.
Yeah, and one other thing that keeps coming up from what you just said is, like, I talk about, like, masculine and feminine energies a lot. Um, 'Cause I think on a grand scale, they've gotten out of balance, but also within ourselves. And, feminine to me is just more the going within. The masculine to me is just going out, the doing, right? And from what you just said, with the self-awareness aspect, like, if we want to, again, going back to the imposter syndrome, really make an impact in the world and kind of move beyond that, like, holding us back, it takes both. Like, you have to have the ability to go within and ask yourself the tough questions, like you just said, and 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 answer them very honestly, by the way, because I always say I was the queen of buying my own bullshit for a long time, right? Like, I would give myself all the great, like, surface level, prim, proper answers, and I was buying it. And then not until I really had to go through some things to realize that, like, I wasn't being truthful with myself, right? So you ask the confronting questions and then give the real answer. And then once you've done that, then that doing aspect has to come into play. So now that you've asked those questions, now you just have to go out and do it. You have to make the post. You have to get up in front of the crowd. You got to make the call. Like, it requires both in order for you to have an effective and balanced approach to actually, like, moving through imposter syndrome in a way that's actually transformative and not just for the moment, right?
That is very profound. That is like enjoying the process, right? Like that's where you become process driven. That's where you start to fall in love with the idea of and the experience of becoming, where I've interviewed multiple ultra marathoners and have done ultra marathons myself. And that experience, or any goal, right? Anyone who's accomplished any goal, just for the sake of this example, they finish the big run and then automatically it's like, what's next, right? You were saying before, maybe you get 30 minutes of appreciating the gravity of the accomplishment. But the best runners fall in love with the idea of becoming process driven, because it's not, and I know this from my experience, it's not and I used to say this when I was studying for the bar, which is someone who struggled with learning disabilities growing up and tons of learning specialists telling you this, that, and the other thing is wrong with you. The bar I took very personally. I didn't want tutors. I didn't want any help. And I would say to my friends, this is just a formality. And so that marathon, that ultra marathon, that achievement, whatever it is, it's just a formality. If you've done the work, if you've put in the training, if you've invested in the process, then you understand that the magic is in the idea and the experience of becoming. And that complete immersion, that frame shift to becoming process driven, it's like, oh, now I actually get to start from square one. And in a lot of ways, it's very humbling, but we could all use a bit more humility in our lives. So ultimately, stuff like that, what you're referring to, I think is very positive overall, because it amplifies the idea that even if we experience these feelings of self-doubt or self-degradation, it's that idea of allowing the transformative experience to actually transform you by reflecting on the good, the bad, the indifference, and kind of taking a neutral approach to, you could think of all the good and bad things that are going to happen, right? Like I'm going to get up on stage, I'm going to deliver this keynote or this seminar, and the audience isn't going to clap and I'm going to stumble over my words. And, well, what about if it goes well? Like, what if what if it goes well? Like, what if people actually enjoy it? What if I enjoy it? Right? Because if I enjoy it, they'll enjoy it. What if I enjoyed it and they didn't enjoy it? Instead of I think it was Emerson who said, like, don't spend the day in explanation. Like, take the time to really appreciate where you're at in this process of transforming and evolving, and realize that it's an infinite game. It's not this like, oh, boom, I arrived. No, that's a milestone. On to the next, but you can always appreciate where you are. And if you learn how to become process driven, that's the true arrival, in my experience and in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. And just even like, as you were saying earlier, like about collecting evidence, I know one thing I didn't really clue into it till you just said it with myself is, and I think with lots of people is that the more journeys, because we're always scared to start, right? That's usually the hesitation, like, oh, I'm scared to start or I'm scared to do this. But the more times you do that, and you can look back, that's evidence in itself of just every transformation you
Yep.
went through. Instead of just adding up the accolades and the achievements, which probably are a natural byproduct of that, you could even just look back in your journey and be like, look, every time I chose to start something new and go through a transformation, it always got better and better and better. And that can be evidence in itself that, like, you're just really good at transforming
Mm.
whatever's on the other side of that, and that to me at this point in my life is something I have started to rely on. It's just like, I know anytime I've started something new, the journey has just been so impactful to who I am as a human being now, that it's like, okay, so what are we going to transform through next? Now, obviously, sometimes that stuff is super uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? And I got to shed some tears and have a couple angry moments along the way, like, no doubt. But again, every time, can you ask yourself, like you said, can you self assess? Every transformative journey I've gone on, have I come out better on the other side of that? And that should be part of your line of questioning as well.
The better the question, the better the answer. And most people, in my experience, they're not asking themselves the right questions. Even the smartest humans on the planet aren't asking themselves the right questions. And, the example I love to give is, how do I make more money? That's not the right answer. That's not the right question, because no one's just going to hand out money. Like, they're not just waiting on a street corner ready to hand you out your $10 million. So it's, how do I create value? What problems can I solve? Who can I serve? Those are better questions. And then once you identify the problems, how do I solve the problem? No. How do I solve this problem in a way that creates value? Okay. How many people does this help? Is it scalable? How can I scale it? Understanding that the quality of the questions that you ask yourself will improve the quality of your life, that really at the end of the day, what we're chasing is the skill set of asking better questions. And I had a professor in law school. We went back and forth about my participation, because it was the difference in like the third of a grade. And it was the difference in my GPA being, I graduated top 25 in my class, but I didn't make cum laude. I fell short by like 0.001. And so if I got this particular grade improved, I would have made cum laude. And he asked me about the quality of my participation, because I had participated a lot. I sat in the front, I raised my hand, and throughout the semester he would comment on my beard or my hair, whatever. So like it was like this weird dynamic with the professor. And I thought for sure I was going to get that grade. And it took me a couple weeks to finally get him on the phone once grades came out. And he asked me what I thought about the quality of my participation. And I told him everything I just said. I raised my hand. I sat in the front. He's like, yeah. But like, did you add value to the conversation? I was like, aren't we supposed to ask questions and not know what's going on and you teach us? Like, isn't that how this goes? It's like, not exactly. And so there's more to that story, but ultimately that was a transformative experience because the quality of my questions weren't strong enough at the time. Now, obviously, they're way different. But me learning that lesson at that point in my career as a student or a graduating student was extremely important because when you understand that your quality of life is going to be measured by the story you tell yourself, and the story you tell yourself is going to be based on your self talk. But if you're just telling yourself things and not asking anything, then you need to develop a new pattern and a new habit that helps you identify problems and solve those problems. Because as much as we like to think that we're in our own world, the human experience is unique, but not that unique that no one's ever dealt with those feelings or those experiences or anything like that. Nothing that I say is super novel. It's a blend of different influences and experiences of my life that have helped me come to certain conclusions. And so, and I would like to think proven methods and frameworks. And so, when you learn how to ask those better questions, you'll get better answers. But it starts with stop just talking and start asking. Because when you start asking, you learn how to start doing. And the more you do, the more experience. The more experience, the more you train your intuition. The more you train your intuition, the better decisions you make. The better decisions you make, the better outcomes you get. The better outcomes you get, your confidence improves. Now imposter syndrome is not going to be as much of an issue anymore, right? So having that perspective and honing that skill over time, I think is an effective roadmap to overcoming imposter syndrome, building a high quality of life, and understanding that, we're all trying to figure it out.
It's such a subtle but profound shift that you just gave us here because like ask better questions, you know what I mean? And what comes up for me is like cuz so most of my clients, the people I work with come to me at a point where they're burnt out, right? And I always talk about how burnout is disconnect within. You've been living outside of yourself for too long that, you've lost touch with what's actually in alignment within yourself. And the way I take what you just said and applying it to what I do and I help people with is like I find most of my clients when they come to me, they're so used to asking questions, but they're always asking questions about the external.
Mm,
How can I what do they need me to do? How do I do this better for them? And obviously there's value in that, of course, but there's way too many questions about what's happening outside of them and not enough questions about what's going on within. Right. So then that's why the disconnect happens. It's like, well, I haven't asked myself in a long time how I feel. I haven't asked myself in a long time, like, is this actually in alignment with me still? And then the other part of that is when I start and I always tell them, they're like, that's hard. I'm like, well, you're developing a new skill set and relationship. Like you haven't asked yourself, you don't even know if you've even asked yourself how you are lately. Like you don't even remember the last time you did that. So it's like getting to know a whole new person again.
yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing that always comes up is, when they start asking this, I said there's going to be multiple voices that pop up internally and you need to be aware of which one you're listening to. So there's the loud voice that we all know. That's when you ask yourself, "Oh, what do I need right now?" They go, "Oh, you need to get this project done by Thursday, so then Friday you can move this ahead and da 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 da." The voice that we all hear. I said, and then to me, I always refer to it as your inner child. I said, then there's also a really quiet voice in there that's saying, hey, I like just need a 10-minute break right now. And like, if we could do that, that would like just help so much. But most people have completely lost touch with that quieter
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
And again, going back to asking the better questions, it's like when you ask the question, you also just have to kind of like shut up and let the truth come to the
Mm,
surface, not just, again, queen of buying my own bullshit. Like, let the real answer come to the surface and learn how to tune into that?
100%. I think you touched on it very accurately when you learn how to talk to that inner child and listen to that inner child. It's a very healing experience, and most people suffer from lack of self-awareness. And you have different types of awareness: situational awareness, emotional awareness. But the key is at a fundamental level. If you can develop awareness about your triggers, about your patterns, about where you do and don't listen, where you're speaking for the sake of being heard versus trying to genuinely add value to a conversation, that is the difference in the top performers in their specific industries. I believe they have an immense amount of self-awareness and understanding of their patterns that helps them offer and create value to solve to solve problems and scale those problems. Scale those solutions. And that inner dialogue, particularly with the inner child. I mean, I have an exercise that I do. I never read about this one in a book, but for me, I created it. I call it the passenger seat exercise, where I had a long commute when I was living in Manhattan, reverse commuting to New Jersey, and it's about an hour change each way. And I was sick of listening to podcasts. I'm not really an audiobook guy. I like to read books, and I didn't want to listen to music either. I don't run with headphones. And so I picture particularly the 15-year-old version of myself sitting in the passenger seat next to me while I drive, and I ask him questions. Would you be proud of you? Why'd you make that decision when you were 15? And I find that relative to where I was 17 or 25, that the 15-year-old version of me in particular is the one that needed the most help. And I really try to talk to that kid as often as I can, and in turn, or ask that kid questions that I think, had I asked myself or had enough emotional awareness to ask myself at the time, that I wouldn't have suffered internally as much as I did. And so, dealing with those external pressures of, what does the world think about me? And we all deal with it in some way, shape, or form. Some people cultivate their inner experience much earlier than others and start taking action sooner. For me, it was very delayed. And so I really try to focus on those questions and listen to those answers. And I've come to some very interesting conclusions as a result that help me heal that inner experience. And inner child work in particular is very powerful, very, very powerful. What's the word I want to use? Framework or methodology that if people take it upon themselves to really just have it, it's not like a crazy thing. You just picture a younger version of yourself and you talk to that version of yourself. You ask that version of yourself questions and just get to know you and where your head was at when you were going through different things. And you'd be surprised at some of the feedback that you get. So I like that you brought that up in particular, because I feel like you said most of us are dealing with like quiet child who just needs maybe 10 minutes to themselves, to gather themselves, to put themselves back in the game. And that particular sentiment, that particular frame helped me and helps me in moments where I'm dealing with some of the insecurities or moments that I feel like I could be doing better, and figuring out what's holding me back and why. Taking a root cause approach helps me solve that problem so I can move on to the next one.
That is an incredible exercise. Like, thank you for sharing that, because that is so, so great, because it's everyone's got to commute at some point, right? So what an
Mm.
effective way to use your time, right? And you're kind of in that isolated container with limited distractions. So I love that. And the visual process of that makes it a lot more real, because when everything's just in your head, it can be hard to decipher that, right? Where it's like, again, if you imagine your 15-year-old self sitting next to you and having that conversation, like it I always reference how the mind doesn't know the difference between like a visualization or something happening in real life,
Hmm.
and I always reference Dr. Joe Dispenza, one of his books that I read. He talked about like how if you go through a car accident and then you retell that story 4 times that week, your body's going to think it's reliving the accident 4 times because every time you regurgitate that, it's visualizing the whole
Hmm.
thing over and over. So like, how do you expect your body to heal if the mind thinks it's going through trauma 4 times that week? But in this instance, having that conversation with the child next to you, it's healing on so many subconscious levels that we honestly have a hard time even fathoming, especially if you haven't done this before. If
Mhm.
you're listening to this and you haven't talked to your inner child, you probably think we're like talking like crazy. Like you're sitting in the
Are we
car.
the weird ones then? I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. Like this podcast just took a left. But anyways, like it's that visualization is so healing on so many levels. Like you won't even realize what you rewire by
Mhm.
doing that. But yeah, you're gonna feel a little silly at first, probably, because again, it's a new skill set. But you have children. I have a niece and nephew, and I always use my niece as an example. And it's like, if she came and told me, "Hey, I need to lay down for 10 minutes." Am I gonna be like, "No, keep working." Like, what are you talking about? Go like, "Of course, honey. What do you need?" I just need to like eat. Like, can I of course, like not for a second would I ever question or doubt her and her telling me what is a basic need that she needs in the moment.
Mhm.
Yet we get so detached from that inner version of ourselves. We get so consumed in the outside world and validation and all these things that we don't even know how to listen to that basic voice anymore. So I love that example so much. I think it's super impactful.
Listen, I hope it helps. It's one of those things where I can't say I read it in a book, but at the end of the day, I put it into practice, and it's definitely something that's worked for me. Hopefully, it can help someone else out there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's a great place to end this podcast on. We give you guys lots of content. We give you a practical tool you can all take away and use this with. And if anyone is out there and tries it, I'm sure Jonathan would love to hear from you what your experience is with it. I would love to hear from you with what that is. But I hope you guys have just taken a lot from this. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for your time and energy because this was a really great conversation. So before we leave, anything you want to share with our audience, anything that you're working on, any projects, where can we find you?
Thank you so much for asking awesome questions. Thank you for bringing me on the show. This was fun, to say the least. You can keep up with my journey, my content, my community inside theinspired.com. You can also follow me on socials, Jonathan Z. Cohen. I just released my new program, the Inspired Action System, where we talk about perspective, presence, and control, all about how you can build resilience into your life. I'm hosting a live seminar January 23rd in New York City. Come check it out. The Art of Overcoming Setbacks, Strategic Resilience. I hope to see you there. And if you got any value out of this, please give this podcast 5 stars because she deserves it.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And we'll see you in the next episode. All right, guys, thanks for tuning into another episode of the Higher Alignment Podcast. If you got something out of this episode, I would ask that you please go subscribe and leave the podcast a 5-star review so that it can help find its way to other people who are having a hard time and need support. My mission in life is to help executives realize that you don't need to suffer in silence while still performing at a high level. I want to help free people of the heavy pressure they carry on a day-to-day basis, and having more people listen to this podcast will do just that. So wherever you listen to this, please go leave it a 5-star review, hit subscribe so you never miss another episode, and we'll see you in the next one.